Okay, this is lesson number 5. It's on groups and organizations. And to begin, we'll pose the question, why do people join groups? So why do people do anything? All right, people do things to please the self. That's at our core. Uh, to serve the self, to satisfy, promote, protect the self. All right. So just to lay the foundation, let's do a quick review of the self. Right? It's important to have this in mind, to understand what drives us to do what we do. The self is a free will. It's our soul. It's the core of who you are. In the Bible, it's also the fleshly nature, the push, our nastiness. The self drives what we want to get. It drives what we want to do, what we want to think and believe. And recall from lesson number 1 that there are 2 factors that general categories of factors actually that determine perceptions and beliefs. One category is cognitive, right, which is the quality and extent of your information and the quality and extent of your analytical ability, which unfortunately is almost always lacking in most people. And the second factor is motivation. The second category is motivation, right? How the self leads to desire, and that alters the way we see things. All right, now let's also review the stages of the development of self. All right, this is Mead's categories here. He said it goes through 3 stages: the I stage, the me stage, and the generalized other stage. The I stage is the earliest, starting from when you're first born to 5 years old. During this time, you're entirely egocentric. You're entirely wrapped up in your own world, and your own world inside of your head is the only reality you know. Now, that persists throughout life to a large extent, but it expands, all right? This I stage, where you're totally egocentric, is largely due to the fact that you cannot empathize with others. You don't have enough knowledge base really to understand and see what other people are thinking. So you live pretty much free of consciousness of what others think of you, which makes you free. Right? There's less self-consciousness. You're more an innocent, carefree child, although you can be just as nasty as, any full adult in terms of being, self-centered and wanting things or whatever. Okay. Now the me stage is the next stage between 5 and 9, and at this stage, a child begins to develop a social self, right? He begins to be able to empathize and kind of see how other people are thinking and feeling, especially towards himself. And this leads to arise of what's called the looking glass self, how we begin to see ourselves in terms of how we perceive others evaluating us. And also, at this point, you start developing self-consciousness. All right, the generalized other stage, it develops at 9 and thereafter. It's when you start beginning to see yourself in terms of an overall set of cultural norms and values, right? And how that influences the way you see things, and how you know what's expected of your behavior and so forth. Like I say here, it influences perceptions and actions, and determine conformity requirements for inclusion within the group. Okay. All right. What else do I want to talk about here? So we have a looking glass self, the idea that the image we hold of ourselves is largely an assessment of how others evaluate us. We tend to see ourselves as we believe others see us. Okay. What else I want to cover here real quickly? I'll review Goffman's dramaturgical theory, and how a key to his theory was understanding that we all have a self, an ego, that is highly attuned to what others think of us and how we appear to others. It's called a mirrored self-image. We seek approval and respect on the one hand, and strive to avoid embarrassment, humiliation, and ridicule on the other hand, almost desperately, right? Now, is that true? I mean, who wants to look like a fool? Who wants to be mocked and ridiculed, right? It just doesn't feel good. Even though that's something that people like to do, they don't like it being done to them. Okay. Now, let's go back. So the self is a driving force behind group behavior. The self is a driving force behind group formation, right? Joining groups. So what is a group? The broadest definition of a social group is it's a collection of people who, one, gather for a purpose. They gather for some specific reason. They have a common identity. They have shared expectations for behavior, how you're supposed to behave in a group, and even how you're supposed to think in a group. They meet regularly, although today that's no longer physical, proximity. You can meet in conference calls, or you can meet with Skype, or in some sort of chat room or something like that. Cyber. All right. So now I want to talk about differentiation between two generalized groups, in-group versus out-group. All right. An in-group is a group you belong to. A social group toward which a member feels respect and loyalty. They like it because it's their group. Individuals identify with other members within a group in a positive way. This group, the in-group, provides support structure for the individual, and it offers protection from the out-group. Motivations for in-group formation include, and this is not an all-inclusive list, being self-serving, greed, insecurity, a sheep herd mentality, seeking safety in numbers, promote a sense of self-worth, self-identity, ego, self-serving tribal instincts. All right, so I have a video. I should have had this ready. All right, this video is somewhat related to it. It shows group mentality within a high school or middle school.
George Abbott School in Guildford, Surrey, has nearly 2,000 pupils who all live within 10 miles of here and are from mostly similar backgrounds. Like all school children, they're divided into groups for lessons, but come break time, they divide themselves.
If you just look across the playground, you'll see that everyone pretty much looks the same. They're all wearing the same uniform, they're the same age, they all have the same accents, they're all the same colour. There's nothing much to distinguish them. So one of the things that's really important to them is to make some differences, to give themselves a sense of being distinctive. And the way they do that is to join different groups and to mark out very important but small differences between each of the groups.
We've been named as the Indie Girls, the four of us. We always themselves for music. There's another group of girls, another large group of girls who are very well recognised, very well known, like Cooper Tracy's or guitars.
People call us like guitars girls, but I don't know, it's because we like to make it like we're not subtle, are we? If you wear socks, you have to wear them. Your skirt's got to be like over the tie or whatever. Kind of tight, shirt in at the front, out the back. And then it comes out a little bit. No jumpers unless you're absolutely freezing. Otherwise, that's what the indie chicks do.
Group of boys in the corner, which we call the grungers, all wear baggy clothes, reputation's being dirty.
The grungers are more like into snowboarding and skateboarding and stuff, like extreme sports, and so kind of more cutting edge.
Up in the cages, where they play football, there's another group of boys called the Garys, who are like the opposite to the grungers.
All the girls hang out here and they hang out down there. It's just sort of like our place and that's theirs. grungers won't go anywhere near the garage because it makes them look as if they like football and they like to wear like gold chains and all that lot. And it's the same way around, the Garys wouldn't want to be near the grungers because it makes them look as if they smell. They don't smell.
What's this?
13 is a really important age when children are really beginning to figure out who they're going to be as adults. They're figuring out, what should I wear? What should I listen to? What should I be interested in? How should I behave? They're moving from that comfortable time of childhood when they could just do what all the children do to now a kind of transitional period, and there's a lot of uncertainty around for them.
There's even more uncertainty if you're someone like Anna, who's what the rest of the playground call a loner, someone who's not part of a group.
I'm independent and everything, but I do sometimes feel that it would be nice to be in a group, to have someone else always there to protect you, to stand up for you. I get names called at me, but it doesn't really bother me that much because if they feel that they have to pick on me because I'm not like them, then it's their own problem.
Anna's proud of her independence and ability to mix. But without realising it, even she's part of a group of loners.
Sometimes these groups are real groups, like these ones out here, like the grungers, for example. They all sit together and they do everything together. Other times they can be groups that are more kind of in our heads. So some of the people out here, for example, might be treated as loners or counted as loners, but you'll find that they themselves have connections that give them that sense of security, that sense that they know what they're doing the right kind of thing.
The loners have bonded just like the grungers, the Garys, the indies and the tarts, and they display all the hallmarks of group mentality, like loyalty and competition. Anna even says it herself.
They're really nice people and everything, and they've got such nice personalities, it can actually be better than some of the people in groups.
So instinctive and subconscious is this need to belong, that we're loyal to groups without realising it, and they change our behaviour in powerful ways.
Okay, so that's just a glimpse into group behavior, why people form groups.
What's up, guys? Rocco. As you know, I'm a mechanic. I shot cars and bike my whole life. My buddy told me.
Okay, some of the reasons why they join groups is because of insecurity. They want to have a sense of identity. They want to have a sense of self-worth, and they compare themselves with people of other groups to evaluate themselves, to rank themselves, and they always want to try to improve their sense of self-worth. In opposition to the in-group are out-groups, groups to which one feels antagonism, contempt, and threat. Out-groups are ridiculed. Oftentimes it's competition. Out-groups are ridiculed, stereotyped, dehumanized, right? Savages, filthy animals, right? Now, a key thing about dehumanization and stereotyping is it's easier to do evil to them, to attack them, to harm them in some way, even physically, if you can dehumanize them. We learned about that in when we talked about networking and impression management and the body of methods called how to manage the morale of the pawns you play. Right. One of the methods was to use aggressive humor, mock them, ridicule them, dehumanize them, belittle them. Right. It makes it easier to attack them. All right. So this video kind of gets into the out-groups.
All social animals. We depend on each other for survival. And as such, like all social animals, we tend to organize ourselves into groups. For humans, this group-based organization has certain psychological consequences. We tend to hold ideas or opinions about our own group and other groups. We tend to have certain feelings towards our own groups and towards other groups. And we tend to act in certain ways around and toward our own groups and other groups. In fact, it's a bit more interesting than that. Generally, humans tend to hold their own group in higher regard than other groups, like their own group more than other groups, and act more nicely toward their own groups than towards other groups. This was demonstrated by the famous Robbers Cave experiment conducted by Sheriff and colleagues in 1954. The experimenters formed two groups of 11-year-old boys in isolation from each other for a period of 8 days, and then brought them into contact with each other under competitive conditions. The result was hostility between the groups, evident in their overt behavior, their evaluative ratings of each other, and their estimates of performance by group members during the competitive task. And if you're thinking, well, of course they found bias. The boys were competing with each other. You should be aware that even before any intergroup competition, when the groups were simply made aware of each other's existence, the mere knowledge of the presence of the other group was sufficient to generate name-calling and other derogatory commentary from each group directed toward the other. In a similar experiment, Doyes and colleagues randomly divided participants into X-type and Y-type based on a bogus test. Even when the participants were led to anticipate no further interaction with members of either group, they rated members of their own group more positively than members of the other group. Bear in mind that these groups had no history, no variation in race, religion, gender, sexuality, or socioeconomic status. They had no reason to dislike each other, and never expected to see or interact with each other again. And still, intergroup bias emerged in their interactions. How much more should we expect to find it between groups that actually matter to people?
Okay. All right, so that leads us to the next section here, which deals with bias, how we distort the way we see things. And so this whole in-group, out-group thing leads to the concept of tribalism, right, with which a big part of that is bias in our perceptions between each other. And a classic example of this was an experiment done called the Klein-Kandansky in-group, out-group self-serving bias experiment, right? And in this experiment, they took 48 kids, 15-year-old kids, boys, divided them into 3 groups of 16, and then each group were shown 2 paintings, right? Both of them abstract surrealist art, which, you know, to me doesn't make sense. I'm sure they don't make any sense to a 15-year-old boy, right? It's like randomly pick which one you like, this one or this one. Klee is a painter here, Kandansky is a painter here, right? And then you choose which one you like. Now, then they're divided randomly, totally randomly, into 2 groups of 8, right? Although they were led to believe that the group they're being placed in was due to the painting they picked. So this was a total, what I want to say, farce here. It had no basis for their grouping, right? But they believed there was some sort of basis. They had some commonality. All right. Now, then each of the 16 boys were asked to score 2 other boys, evaluate them. One from the in-group, one from the out-group, right? So now the only rule was that the total score must add up to 15. For example, if you give the boy from your group a 1, then you have to give the boy from the other group a 14. Well, do you think this occurred very often or not at all? In actuality, what they found out is the vast majority of boys scored way at the far end, where they biased their judgment in favor for the boy from their group. Although they knew nothing about the boy, they were randomly placed there simply due to the fact that they're a boy from their group, they must be better. So if they gave a boy a score 12, they'd have to give the other boy from the other group a score 3, or 14 to 1, and so forth. All right. All right. Then they did a variation of this, and they asked the boys to score 2 boys again, one from their group, one from the other group. And if they gave the boy from their group a 19, they'd have to give the boy from the other group a 21. If they gave him a 17, they have to give him a 25. If they gave a 13, they have to give a 23 with a negative 10 differential. Here's -7, -2. But if they gave the boy from their group a 7, then they can give the boy from the other group a 1, which is a positive differential. Now, you would think that they want to give the highest score to the boy from their group, right? The high scores to all of them maybe, so they would pick this, but they didn't. They chose this, the lowest score. Instead of 19, they rated their boy a 7 because it was at least 6 higher than the other boy. So this was a competitive thing. It was about, increasing the perception of your self-worth here. Now, which one do you think the boys chose the most? All right, they chose the least here. All right, so they didn't. So they'd rather choose the lowest score for their in-group boy, so long as it made a positive difference against the out-group boy. All right, and again, all of this is based upon no actual, real, basis. Right? They're totally randomly thrown together. They don't know each other. All they know is that they're in the in-group or the out-group. All right, so this is called self-serving bias in Chicago. I also call it the Dennis Rodman effect, and here's kind of the basis for that. These two guys here, Bill Laimbeer and Dennis Rodman, were two of the dirtiest players ever in NBA history. Right, they were just nasty and dirty. They used to be teammates on the Detroit Pistons. Then Rodman went off to the San Antonio Spurs, and then they're fighting each other, right? Now, when they were on the Pistons, or when Rodman was on the Spurs, the Bulls fans hated these guys with a passion. They just couldn't stand these guys, right? Then Dennis Rodman is traded to the Bulls, and they love the guy. The guy is just as bad, if not worse, right, when he comes to the Bulls, but he's their guy now, so they love him, right? It goes from hate to love because he's your guy, right? There's a little bit of self-serving there. Now, does this apply to referee calls? Let's say you're watching a football game, and your team is playing against another team that you hate, right? And a flag is thrown, and a call is made by the ref, which is questionable, that goes against your team. I mean, you just go berserk, right? Like, bad call, stupid ref, right? Then not 5 minutes later, an exact same situation happens, but the call goes against the other team. And you don't give a second thought of it, or you think it's a great call, right? It is just as questionable. Now, does this apply to patriotism? Why are people patriotic, right? Mostly because it just enhances their sense of ego, enhances self, right? They hold it dear to their hearts. Are people honest about what the U.S. does? Do they even know what the U.S. does? And if they're exposed to things, do they discard that, disbelieve it automatically, without any knowledge of the facts? So that's the next thing. Self-serving bias is facilitated by the fact that people do not retain facts, making it easy for them to cherry-pick what they want to believe. All right. And so here's kind of a depiction of that. Let's say these are the facts surrounding an event. It could be a current event or a historical event. Right, here's all the facts, right? Now, first of all, do people retain all these facts? Oh, hell no, right? And if there's any fact, when it's presented, they don't like, they'll discard it outright. They'll just, bogus, right? Or they'll find a way. If it is totally documented, they'll find a way in their mind of discrediting it, right? It could be totally ridiculous. Here's an example. I once just shared with a person the basics of the Gulf of Tonkin incident, how the U.S. manufactured that incident, and that led to the Vietnam War, how we basically manufactured the war, and through trickery and deception, gained the legal basis for the war through the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. And I told him, all this stuff comes from government documents. And this guy says to me right away, well, the government's lying. Right? I'm saying, well, wait a minute, the government is lying to make itself look bad? And he's like, yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. I'm thinking, holy, he has no basis for saying that. There's no evidentiary basis for that, and it's just ludicrous. They lied to make themselves look bad. All right, and he believed it. Why? Because it satisfied him. Right? It's not about anything logical, true. Right? It's more about what you want. So people blindly discard what they do not want to believe. Right? They cherry pick the one little fact which kind of supports what they want to believe or can be twisted to support what they want to believe. They cling to this. They remember this. Right? All this is gone. And that forms their reality. So people bias what they keep, what they throw out, right? What they discard. And the things that they do keep, they bias that as well. They twist and distort this to better support what they want to believe, right? Today, the go-to method for doing this is fake news. Anything they don't want to believe, fake news. It's that easy, right? Anything that goes against what they want to believe, fake news. And that then forms a reality. So they have whacked out, twisted realities, totally biased and distorted. So here's an example of self-serving bias, right? These are mirror image countries. One country, country A, country B, right? For these people, it's our blessed homeland, right? But to the others, it's their barbarous wastes. Then our glorious leaders, they're wicked despots. Our great religion, their primitive, false superstition religion. Our noble populace, they're backward, dirty savages. Our heroic adventurers, they're brutish invaders and imperialists, right? So how people bias and distort things. People do this automatically. All right, here's a kind of a current example of self-serving bias. Back in the day of Bill Clinton, with the whole Monica Lewinsky thing, Bill looks all innocent here. He wasn't all that innocent, right? He lied his butt off about this Monica Lewinsky thing, right? But the evangelicals, the right-wing morality team, like immoral, depraved, adulterers. Now, then you get Donald Trump, who's far, far worse, right? And they turn a blind eye to him. They just cherish him, right? They don't point the finger at him at all. Here they're crazy going, barking and pointing the finger, right? Do people do that? Yeah. It makes one wonder about evangelicals, right? Are they really Christians first, or are they self-serving, amoral scumbags first? Totally promoting self and their agenda, their selfish little agenda. So here's some more self-serving bias. This is, people do this all the time. So they're quick to point the finger when they see someone do something wrong, but when they do it, they don't even register it. It's like, nothing, right? They do the exact same thing and they don't think about it, so they don't even remember it. It's nothing. It's no sweat off their brow. All right, here's another common example. A person cuts someone off while they're driving, right? When they cut someone else off, they don't even give it a second thought, right? And if the person honks at them, right, they get annoyed at them, right? Now, if they get cut off, they go crazy berserk. They get so angry. All right, here's another one that's all too common that I face all the time. People insult, mock, instigate, provoke you, right? They go out of the way to do it, right? And then if you throw it back at them, even in like a logical way, they get crazy mad. They go berserko mad. And they point the finger at you like, you're such a troublemaker. You start stuff. They don't even think that, it doesn't even register in their brain that they started it all, that they initiated this all. And that's human nature. All right, so here's a typical thing. It deals. This deals with social reality and people being smartasses. All right, so this happens quite a bit. People read something, some simple, baseless, lying thing in social reality, and they believe it fully. Right? They do all the time. People think, I'm not that dumb. No, people do this all the time. They're constantly falling for social reality, and it never ends, no matter how many times they teach it. Then they think they know something true because everyone is saying it. Well, everyone's saying it, so it's got to be true, right? Though it is based upon no research, no facts, no intelligent analysis. Plus, it's a single point attack, a single tiny little morsel, insignificant, but all defining, all powerful in people's minds. And then they say, see, that proves everything once and for all. Then they think they know something when they know nothing. And then they go out and attack the target, instigating, provoking, mocking, being smartasses. What they do is they throw little snide comments as they walk by. They always do this. Some little thing about reality, right? Or they cough and whistle, clear their throat. right, as they go by the target. Just, some, right? And then they're going to say, oh, that's just natural. People just do that all the time. Nah, that's not true. And they'll lie about that. All right, so step 4. Then the target gets attacked all day, every day, right? It just goes on and on every single day. It's like you wake up and you don't want to go out because you're expecting people to just, to go at you. And it's like, and literally, you don't like walking into places because you just expect people to just start going at you. The little jabs. All right, and then the target gets all fed up and rubbed raw. Let's say he throws it back at them, at the smart asses, in a logical way, right? And I'll give you a way here down here when I talk about, we get to the conclusion down here. Here, whether it's a quirk of human nature, generalized stupidity, or both. And if I pose that question, people get all offended. You're such a troublemaker. So, if you do this, right? If you pose a logical question, right? Smartasses get crazy mad. They see themselves as innocent victims who do no wrong, and the target is the instigator. I mean, that's how you distort the way you see things. I'm an innocent victim who did no wrong, right? And that's just like what I said here. People distort the way they see things. They do no wrong, right? When they do it, that's nothing. When they see someone else do it, oh man, that's the worst offense ever. All right. Now I've done a lot of work on in sociology, and part of it involved how wars are started, how the masses are manipulated into wars, right? And I've taught mountains and mountains of material on this, and I know that no one remembers anything basically. Like, very little is retained, right? And certainly nothing in terms of real specific facts. Now, I've taught that the U.S. has started a lot of wars throughout history. If I say this, the U.S. has started a lot of wars throughout history, right? And, the average American who's pretty much self-loving, right? What? The U.S. starts wars? That's crazy. Democracies are inherently peace-loving. Why? Because they're run by the people. Right? The U.S. does so much good in the world. USA, 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 as they beat their chests, all right, and make themselves feel good, all right? And I can only respond, no, we started many wars. That's a fact, right? Hell no, USA stands for truth, justice, and American way, and all the guys run out and, run back home and put on their Captain America T-shirt, right, to make their point, and to make them feel, this is the reality here. See, this proves it. I mean, is this far-fetched? Well, for some people it's far-fetched, but there's a lot of people it's not. It defines their reality. It's what they're exposed to. Sorry, comic book reality and myths cannot possibly substitute for real facts and intelligent analysis. Maybe or maybe not, but social reality can. Yeah, I know, it does all the time, because not knowing any facts and intelligent analysis, social reality is all people have. Right? That's all they have. So that defines the reality. Social reality dominates the minds of the masses when it is totally baseless and a joke. Proven so, thousands of times over. But everyone runs back to it. All right, so social reality is a group, right? And they certainly meet regularly. People go to this all day long, multiple times, right? They probably have, notifications set up where something's passed. Bing, their phone makes a little noise, and they go read it, and they totally believe it, right? Not knowing any facts, but the one thing that's being passed right now is their soul reality, the thing that's waved in front of their face. So social reality is what everyone is saying, and that in itself derives great power, right? Its power is derived from the power of social influence. So social influence is huge. I mean, one of the best means of support is social support. Whether it's like family support, encouragement for this or that, to help a person, right? Stay off the alcohol. An alcoholic, you stay off the alcohol, right? This dominates, not facts or intelligence, especially if these don't exist. If you don't know any facts, how can they have any power? Social reality is usually the most powerful influence upon perceptions. Social reality appears totally organic in origin and grassroots, like natural, right? But in fact, waves of social reality momentum can be artificially created and controlled by formal groups, right? Get it going, and it's just going to propagate itself. It becomes self-propagating. Everyone starts passing it. Everyone's reading it, right? Everyone is BSing about it. Everyone is then starts saying similar things, parroting it. Now, cell phones make social reality prolific, right? It's widespread, right? It's instantaneous. It's always present. It's in your pocket. It's powerful. It's a dominant reality, and it spreads at chain reaction speed. I mean, it's not even a chain reaction. It's not like one, pass it to another, and then pass it to two, and then pass it to two, right? It's one, pass it to everyone at the same time. It's out there. Though social reality is most dominant, it needs no real basis in facts. Zero basis in facts, right? All it is everyone's saying it. Yeah, I know that was the truth. You'd be surprised. You think no one is that stupid. No, everyone does that. Why? In fact, the facts are all forgotten immediately after they are presented, right? And this is based upon simple neurophysiology, right? People will deny this, but the reality is, through nearly 1,000 actual tests, I've proven this over and over. People don't retain things, right? You have to grow dendrites connecting neuron to neuron. Then you have to develop synapses at those connection points, right? It doesn't happen easy, right? It's not like we're silicon chips. You have to grow literal biological appendages from one neuron to the next, right? So social reality is the most real reality, though it does not need to be based in anything real. No facts or intelligent analysis. Why? Because people don't remember these, right? So they're not a factor. They don't contest it, right? Because they don't exist in people's brains. Though virtually none of the facts are remembered immediately after they're presented, the fuzzy overall impression remains strong. Therefore, clever manipulators will use what's called a Mark Antony method. They don't attack right away. In fact, they do the exact opposite. They support it for a day, like it's brilliant, right? And then they wait for a day for that overall impression to fade. All the facts are gone. You can have 500 facts, 1,000 facts. None of it's remembered, right? Within a day, the overall impression is gone. And now, no longer based in facts, where you can that impression can be blown away, right? So they wait a day. And there's more to the Mark Antony method. I'm not going to review that right now. So liars manipulate the masses by passing something in social reality to shift focus off the facts. Well, they're all forgotten anyways, and onto a distortion or lie, and it will, without fail, create a wave of social momentum. It always does. So I show this in this diagram, this picture here. It depicts a principle in cognitive development called permanence, right? Where you get a little kid, their brain develops to the point where they remember things. So you put a little doll in front of its face. This doll represents the facts here. They see it for a second, right? But in a second, they're gone. A minute, less than a minute. The very moment I finished teaching a historical event. Oh man, I think something's in the air. Hold on, I gotta take a break. I gotta leave here for a second. Okay, I'm back. Something was in the air. So where were we? We're talking about this picture. So this shows the stage of cognitive development called permanence, right? Where you put this little doll in front of this kid, and like, oh yeah, great doll, let me play with it, right? But then you put a wall in front of the kid, and immediately the kid forgets that the doll's over there, right? But at the point where they gain permanence, even if you put the little wall screen in front of it, they know the doll's still behind there, right? Now, even though this seems like infantile, This happens when it comes to real facts, even in adults, and all adults. Facts do not remain. They're not retained. 1 second after I finish teaching 500 facts in a historical event, right? You're not growing those neurons. So almost nothing is retained. Maybe 3. If I give it one-on-one, the average is 3 facts remembered, right? But in very generalized way, partially distorted, right? Simplistic, not all there. And that's it, right? But what dominates is social reality, what everyone is saying, because this is waved in front of people's faces constantly. And if everyone's saying it, people tend to believe it's true. It's like some impulse. They believe it's true because everyone's saying it. And then they think, yeah, that's true. That's what's right. And it has no real basis in reality. All right. So some examples of social reality counterswings, right, to generate a wave of ridicule, mockery, and disbelief, right? Well, ad hominem. They always do ad hominem. They try to attack your credibility in some way. The CIA sets these up all the time, little ad hominem attacks. Right? They often deal with get you again games, where they get you, and as soon as you say something, they attack that. They set you up to be attacked, to attack your credibility, and they create a wave, and then everyone believes that wave. They can pass a mocking joke, which goes back to ad hominem. If they can pass a joke to make you look like a fool, well, who's going to believe you? This defines reality. A whole mountain of facts. You don't remember a single pebble from this mountain. Honestly, that's the honest to God's truth. Nothing is remembered as far as the facts. But a joke that's passed right now, that defines belief, total belief. One word reality, crazy, unbelievable, right? Unreal. That defines a reality. Simple, baseless, single word. All facts, all intelligence, not a part of it, just a single word. Bogus attack upon a single vulnerable fact. And they do this. They of all the stuff that I go through, I can present 500 facts. They're going to zero in on the one fact, which is, even though it's totally true, they're going to think that, well, people are going to have the hardest time believing this, right? Like, what is it? Truth is stranger than fiction, or something like that, right? And they jump all over that and try to pass an attack upon that, right? The one vulnerable thing. Shift all focus upon it and let that characterize everything else. All the 499 other facts, all forgotten. They'll twist and distort what the messenger says, then attack those distortions. All right, so people don't remember exactly what I said. So they'll twist what I say in a way that's easy to attack. They'll set up a straw man. It's easy to knock down this big, phony, bogus thing that they make, right, out of what I said. And then they attack what they make. Or they pass false information. Or they use hate and anger. Or they'll put words in my mouth, stuff I didn't say at all, right? So they're making a straw man, setting up something, right, that I didn't say. This is their own making. And then attack what they make, right, attributing that to me. And this is the typical straw man fallacy, right? Okay. In all cases, they focus on a straw man, which is obviously wrong and easy to attack. The straw man, the liar set up to knock down and discredit, has nothing to do with the facts and intelligent analysis, nor what the target person actually said. But it works because no one remembers the facts and analysis or bothers to check on them, right? People don't do fact checks, right? They just go with what's being waved in front of their face right now. Social reality is often called cell phone reality because it's often nothing more than silly, simple, baseless little blurbs in 1 or 2 sentences which have nothing to do with the immense body of facts and intelligent analysis, but it dominates people's realities. Why? Because it's always there. It's always being waved in front of your face. It's simple and easy to remember. It's simple to understand. And if everyone's saying it, it gets social support, social reinforcement, and that becomes real, whether it has any real basis or not. All It is more powerful if it reinforces what people want to believe. So if it coincides with what people want to believe, which it almost always does, that gives it more power, right? If people want to disbelieve you, well then, if you make up something which helps them disbelieve, well, they're going to believe that. They're going to jump all over that. So why is social reality so powerful and dominant in people's minds? One of the reasons, the key reason, is salience. Salience means to stand out. So if you make something stand out in mind, it tends to have, have greater effect, and it tends to be remembered, right? So social reality salience factors. One is social reinforcement by the masses. This is huge salience. This sticks out, right? Social reinforces by the masses in social media. Repetition. This adds salience. The more it's repeated, if everyone's saying it, passing it around, that becomes real. A mocking joke. Jokes last. Abstract, complex facts, boom, forgotten. Nothing retained. But a joke, a simple, baseless, meaningless joke which has no relevance, well, that sticks. I'll give you an example. I took accelerated U.S. history my junior year, and, I think I got a B or an A in there. I always got B's or A's in accelerated classes, right? But I didn't learn anything. I just studied. I just crammed for a test, right? And I swear, coming out of U.S. history accelerated with all the smart kids, right? I remembered nothing. But I remembered his jokes. I had like 7, 8 jokes this guy had, which were so fun. I remembered them. Remembered nothing about U.S. history, but I remembered his jokes. Emotions, especially anger and hate. This stands out in mind. This has salience. Complex facts, gone. Nothing retained. Recency, right now and ongoing, and continuous repetition. All right. So recency is important. In fact, this becomes an issue in like presidential campaigns, or high-profile election campaigns. Right. If you want to release something like damaging to a candidate, right, don't pass it like 2 months before, because by the time election rolls around, everyone's forgotten it. It's no longer like it's distant past. Right, you got to do it within, like I'd say, like 3 to 6 days is ideal. Right, you need at least 3 days for it to like be passed around, to germinate, to build up. All right, more and more it's passed, it builds up more. Right, but they say 3 to 10 days. Right, 10 days is stretching it, but it still works. Right, especially if it's repeated, passed around by the media. All right. It's got to be simple, easy to understand. Complex, sophisticated analysis, people don't even follow it. It's discarded right away. But if it's simple, easy to understand, it sticks. Captured in 1 or 2 sentences. You can't, it's like bullet points. You can't give a long diatribe. Like, this is kind of a long diatribe, right? How much is this going to stick, right? How much people are going to retain of this? Well, if you leave a simple 1 or 2 sentence blurb, boom, right? And you repeat that sticks. Matches desires. It's like a jingle, like an advertising jingle. It's got to be something short, simple, and sing-songy. That'll stick. Matches desires. If it supports and facilitates what you want to believe, and especially if it's ego-satisfying and it strokes your pride, oh, that'll be potent. That'll stick. All right, so here's a quick diagram of factors that make social reality super salient, why it's believed by the masses, right? How easy it is to manipulate, right? And how there's no real basis in facts or intelligent analysis. So let's go through this. Social reality, it's believed by the masses, it dominates perceptions, reason why it's super salient, but at the same time, it's easy to manipulate, and there's no real basis in facts and intelligent analysis, right? So why is it super salient? Well, one, it gets support from social reinforcement. This is dominant. It's powerful, right? If everyone's saying it, people tend to believe it's true, even though it has no basis in reality. It's repetition. It's repeated over and over. It's passed over and over again. It exploits powerful emotions like humor and anger. It's not just recent. It's recent. Social reality one day could be different than the social reality the next day. People have totally forgotten what it was the day before. What they remember is what's being currently waved in front of their face. So it's not just recent, but it's current and continuing and ongoing. And it's right now, in your face. It often uses a mocking joke and aggressive humor, which this sticks. This dehumanizes, but also it discredits, even though there's no basis in reality here. It's simple, it's easy to understand, so it sticks. It impacts, and it also impacts the broadest base of people because it's easy to understand. True facts and intelligent analysis cannot possibly compete. None of these are remembered. Thus, they have zero salience. This social reality is always available. It's available because you just reach in your pocket and look at your phone. It's always there. It's instantaneous. By shifting focus, social reality actually destroys true facts and intelligent analysis by helping it push out of mind. But you know what? You don't need any help. People don't retain things. Like I said, the second I'm done teaching something, nothing's retained, or next to nothing's retained. It's aligned with what people want to believe. This makes it super salient, right? If it supports what they want to believe, oh man, they'll like uplift it like crazy. They'll jump all over this. They'll remember this. It's easy to manipulate, right? Well, one way is you align it with what people want to believe. If you can tie this to something that supports their ego and their pride, oh man, right? Or if it on the opposite, if it offends people, right? They'll disbelieve it. So it's always available and instantaneous. It's easy to manipulate. It's easy to propagate via electronic social networks, anywhere, everywhere, anytime via cell phone. Social reality shifts can be started like a wave. And once they started, they propagate themselves like a California wildfire. They spread themselves, right? Okay. There's no basis in real fact in intelligent analysis. All right. It's a short, simple blurb devoid of real complexities. True facts in intelligent analysis have zero salience. All right. In fact, true facts in intelligent analysis are buried by this. All right. So usually a day or two after true facts intelligent analysis are presented, you create a social reality shift to bury them, right? And to shift the wave of belief. All right. That deals with the Mark Antony method, which I'm not going to go back into. So here's social reality. It's super salient, stands out. These are, what stands out in your brain. It stands out like crazy, right? Here's a large body of facts, intelligent analysis. The huge, immense mountain. Does this have any salience in mind? You would think of this mountain would have, right? No, none of this is remembered. So it doesn't really have this. This is generous right here, right? Usually it's like nothing. There's nothing here. There's only the one little thing that's past today. That dominates, right? That determines what people believe. So social reality is super powerful, yet utterly mindless, like a big, dumb, inanimate wave, right? It's powerful. There's a little sailboat. It's going to get crushed, all right? Right? Is there any intelligence in this? No, right? But all these particles are being moved along together, right? And it's like the wave in a stadium, right? All these masses moving together, right? Right? Now, is it powerful? Yeah. Is it this powerful? This is like what do you call it, a fable, all right? The fables usually have some sort of like real basis, all right? All right, so this is the king without any clothes, right? How this king is walking around buck naked, right? But because everyone is saying, "Oh, what lovely clothes," right? Everyone believes it, except this little kid's like, "What? What are you talking about?" Right? This little simple kid who's not influenced by social reality, right? What are you talking about? The king's just buck naked. All right. So is this a joke? Right? It kind of is, right? Is it an exaggeration? Yeah, it kind of is, right? But is there truth to this? Yeah, there is. And in a lot of cases, it's not very far off, right? Let me give you an example. I'm exposed to a long-standing practice. It's common, right? Going on 30 years has been done, right? Of people instigating, provoking, mocking, and insulting, right? I mean, there's just like nastiness in people where they have to get a jab in. It's just like something in their human nature, right? I know I'm not this way. I don't instigate and provoke, right? I'm actually a pretty nice guy. But my weakness is I retaliate, I react. I don't start things, but I have a weakness in, I don't like being mocked, right? So, right. So they do this: coughs, whistles, throat clearings, right? Everyone knows this. Countless people do this. Right? So everyone knows it. Countless people do it. But as social reality says, it's BS. The masses believe it. Everyone knows it, and still, you can be convinced that it's all BS, right? Because everyone's saying it. That's how powerful social reality is. So this is close, all right? There's cases where it's close. It's crazy how this can happen. Everyone knows it. Yet if social reality says so, it dominates. And this has been done. Such attacks like, oh, you're crazy, that doesn't exist. That exact same attack has been done multiple times, and it works every time, right? And you wonder, are people like demented? Are they, mentally, disabled or something, or what is it? What can explain it? So now this case of cough, whistles, and throat clearance is so simple, right? There's no complexity here, and everyone knows it. Now, if you compare that to some very complex event with a vast amount of facts you have to remember, right? Right? It requires sophisticated intelligence. Does that stand any chance at all against social reality? No, right? It has no chance because no one remembers a single thing, and people are going to get offended. What are you talking about? Right? You're saying I forget everything? If you ask them though, in reality, if you ask them one thing, of all the vast mountain of things I've taught, right? If you ask people, anyone across the board, very few people would come up with anything, right? Only a small, tiny handful would come up with a handful of things. The vast majority will come up with zero. But what do they all have? They have social reality. And that tells them that everything I taught is bogus, even though they remember none of it. So that goes to this, facts. These are the facts, they're totally forgotten. In an instant they're forgotten. What remains? Social reality. That dominates. That's in front of your face. That becomes your big reality. And what is it? It's a great white wall. The colorless all color, with no real substance. Right? This is just like, the whole thing in Melville's Bartleby the Scrivener, right? The white wall, right? Like the great white whale, all right? The colorless all color, believed by all the masses, but having no basis whatsoever. Empty, void, right? So here's the facts. Here's the stuff I teach, let's say, right? A whole vast mountain of facts and intelligent analysis, right? All the vast work I've done and taught, right? What do people remember from this? Do people have any of this in their heads? Do they even have a tiny single little rock? No. Hell no. Not a single fact. The vast majority have nothing, right? Not a single intelligent analysis. But they all have this. Whatever's waiting in front of their face right now. This dominates, right? They all have this, the great white wall, the colorless all color, completely void of all real substance, based upon, for example, a single, simple, silly, meaningless diversion, a tiny morsel, but believed by all, and all characterizing, all powerful, all defining. Everything is explained by this. This stands no chance. Real facts and intelligent analysis stands no chance against this. This is a joke. This is nothing, but this dominates. And it always does. So people will get violently offended at this, right? They'll say, what do you mean? I remember all of it, or I remember most of it, right? But if you asked any one of them to state the facts, few can state one, right? The vast majority can state none. Okay? Now, is this mean? Am I saying this because, no, this is just a fact. This is a fact of life, right? Whether it's due to biology, lack of motivation, lack of effort, lack of ability, right? People are not going to retain things. So I can teach them how social reality is baseless and a joke thousands of times, greater than 1,000, many thousands of times. Do people ever learn? I can prove this to them. Do people ever learn? No. They always go back to and run to social reality like a dog goes back to and eats its own vomit, right? They always go back to. There's no stopping it. Why? Because that's the only thing they have. So here's the final judgment in social reality. It doesn't matter how many thousands of times people are shown how baseless, distorted, empty, ridiculously simple, and manipulated social reality is. They'll go back to it like a knee-jerk reaction, like an uncontrollable itch they just can't scratch, like a dog goes back and eats its own vomit, like something they just can't control, like an incessant impulse. Now, is this bizarro craziness? Yeah, it is. You would think that no one is that, I don't know, whatever, crazy or stupid, right? And is this bizarro craziness due to a quirk in human nature? Yeah. Why do I believe this? Because I know that highly intelligent people fall for this all the time. People with PhDs fall for this all the time, right? But at the same time, can you say that, how can this not be stupidity? I say it's generalized stupidity, but how can it not be stupidity if you fall for it thousands of times, right? So could it be both? And is it essentially both? Now, that's what I point out to people, right? In recent days. They insult me. They're smart asses, and I point it out like that, right? I say, well, it's either human nature or it's just plain stupidity. How else can you explain it, right? They get crazy mad, right? They forget immediately the fact that they're the ones who initiated, instigated, provoked, right? And then it's passed in social reality. No one coughs or whistles, to insult. That's crazy, right? Everyone knows it. Countless people do it, and yet it's believed. That is crazy. Why? Because social reality dominates. You think it's not true? And you think that's impossible? All right. So yeah, that's a conclusion there. Now that's the first group, social reality. That's a group, right? We talked about in groups. We talked about out groups, right? That's a group. All right. So let's talk about some other groups, and this is more basic, generic sociology, how they define things. So this is kind of boring, but we'll talk about it anyway. So here's a bunch of groups. You got primary groups, secondary groups, reference groups, social aggregates, categories, organizations, bureaucracies, and so forth, right? So let's go through them real quickly. So primary group is like your main close group, right? It's like your family or a bunch of close friends, right? Maybe they're siblings, right? Small group, right? It's not that big. It's face-to-face communication. It's not through distant connections, whatever, right? There's intense emotional ties involved. It's highly intimate where you share a lot of things. There's a strong sense of commitment to each other. Primary groups, however, are less stable because the loss of only a few can terminate the whole group. For example, let's say the parents go out, they send the kids off with a babysitter, and they go out for dinner or something like that, and they get in a car accident, they die, right? Well, then that could break up the whole family. The remaining siblings can be sent to foster care, or they can be split among different relatives, going to different families or whatever. Okay, so examples include family, childhood, friends, small, tight, little groups. Secondary groups are less intimate, they're less personal, they're larger, right? Things like your workplace or schools or churches, clubs, right? So it's less intimate, there's weaker emotional ties and commitments between the people, less enduring relationships. The group, however, is more stable as a whole because people can come and go and the group will survive, right? Here, if a few people go, that can destroy the whole group, right? One or two people coming and going, well, that's not going to destroy the group, right? People come and go in churches all the time. People die, All right, reference group. So reference group provides a standard of reference for judging your self-worth, right? Judging oneself, a group to gauge your self-worth and form one's self-identity. It's kind of like those groups, those kids, right? The Tarts and the Tracys and the whatever, the indie girls and the grunges and whatever, the sportle nerds and geeks and dweebs and all that stuff, all the different groups. Okay. A person does not need to be a member of his or her reference group. Examples are someone you look up to, you want to be like, right? Too often girls think the ideal is to be a supermodel, right? And that leads to, some issues like, bulimia and anorexia and so forth, right? Personally, I think these girls are way too skinny and bony. Some people want to be like guys want to be like athletes, right? A lot of people want to be part of the in crowd, right? I want to be anything but the in crowd because I think these people are all lame, right? All like ego-centered, concerned about their appearances. Okay. All right, so social aggregates. A social aggregate is like a random happenstance group, all right? This is like real informal group. All right, it's a collection of people who happen to be together. Now, this happens more often as population density increases, like a big city, right? You're going to have these happen more often. In more rural areas, they'll be less common. It's a collection of people who happen to be together at one point in time. There's no necessary interaction. You can be here as waiting at a bus stop or in an elevator. You're not going to be talking to each other, people you don't know. Usually, or in a baseball game here, this looks like something like Wrigley Field. It almost looks like Wrigley Field. All right. Here's a beach, right? Here's like a parade. Here's a bus, right? There's no necessary interaction. You don't identify with each other. So here's examples I gave, right? The social aggregates have increased in modern society, especially with increased urbanization that pull people in closer proximity. Has that made societies more personal or less impersonal, or more impersonal? Right? I think more impersonal. In Chicago, you have so many possible aggregates all the time. You have so many people, but because there's so many people don't give a damn about each other, right? That kind of happens in a big city, right? You're just so numbed or anesthetized towards other people because you're surrounded by somebody that it gets really impersonal, and a lot of times people don't care at all. And so is this related to Durkheim's concept of anomie? Is that a factor in anomie? Yeah, I believe so. Big cities can be more impersonal. All right. So social categories that people share a common trait, right? Like in this case, like gender. Here are all graduates. Here are all old people. Here are all doctors. They're all Sikhs, right? A lot of people, they're Muslims, which means they're terrorists. No, these guys aren't even Muslim. They're Sikhs. Right? Totally different religion. Here you have Polynesians. They look like Hawaiians. You don't have to be Hawaiians. All right. People who share common characteristics like gender, but do not necessarily interact or identify with each other, right? Other examples are occupation and race. Okay, I gave these already. Religion is the one that... Organizations have clear, identifiable membership, directed collective action to attain the common purpose, right? Formal organizations are designed, they're made, these things are created intentionally with clearly defined goals, clear set of rules, regulations, procedures, channels for collective resources and actions, right? To control, channels to control collective resources and actions, channels to control. Okay. Examples, this is a business, this is a hospital, right? Bureaucracies, a formal organization, usually governmental, right, based on explicit rules with clear, impersonal, and hierarchical authority structure. All right, so here's an example of a hierarchical authority structure, real simple. Guy at the top, he's in direct charge of these guys, this guy's in charge of these guys, and so forth, right? So it's top-down, hierarchical control, run by full-time salaried officials. So every one of these guys is a full-time salaried official, right? They're professionals, they're lifelong experts, hopefully good at what they do. Weber believed that bureaucracies were necessary to run large-scale social systems in modern societies, right? Why? Well, because as the size of societies go up and the complexity of those societies go up, and we're very complex. There's a lot of different things that need to be done, in our society. You need to have bureaucrats, lifelong experts. Elected officials cannot be experts in everything, right? The people can't rule directly because they can't become experts in everything. They don't have time, right? It is not humanly possible, right? And usually they don't care to be experts in everything. All right. But the problem is, Weber said that, as societies get bigger, you're going to need these bureaucrats, right? But that's a threat to democracy because bureaucrats are not elected. They're lifelong officials who they can get into positions of power. They can control resources. They can control policy and planning, right? And yet they're not elected. They're not accountable to the people, all right? And if they got an agenda, well, they can carry out their agenda. All right, so because of that, Weber said, well, you need to have 5 characteristics of an ideal bureaucracy, right? One, he said there's a clear-cut chain of command. We talked about this already, the pyramid thing. And there's coordination, decisions of actions. So there's coordination, there's effective direction of actions and resource allocations, right? There's written rules to govern conduct at all levels, right? But the most general are at the top because these are the guys dealing with the overall big picture, right? They have to have more flexibility. As you go down the chain, what they do is more limited. Their scope is very broad in general. Here their responsibilities are very limited, so they have more clearly defined rules, and they got to follow the book, right? Does that make sense? Let's see if I said it different here. Because higher levels of organizations encompass all the requirements in unforeseen scenarios, their rules are more general and flexible. At lower levels of the organization, the job requirements are more set and specific. Therefore, the rules are more narrow, specific, and strictly followed. You do things by the book. All right, officials are all full-time and salary. Pay goes to the ranks, so higher pay up here. That's a function of motivation, right? And performance, right? But that doesn't always work that way. Promotion is based upon ability and seniority, right? And performance. I should say that, right? Based on ability and seniority, but you also have network and politics. Right? This always comes into play. Network politics. All right. Clear separation between work and outside life. Now, to ensure purity of motives of these officials, right? They do not own the material resources or the means of production. This kind of goes back to the 19th century discussion of capitalism, right? Means of production, right? They don't have a personal incentive here, conflict of interest, a personal profit motive involved here, right? They're pure public servants, not self-serving, without conflict of interest. There's no conflict of interest. Now, in reality, does that really happen? Well, in some cases it does, right? But in some cases it doesn't. Take the example of Halliburton, right? We talked about Halliburton. We'll talk about it again tomorrow, or actually, I'll try to get the lesson today. Halliburton, right? Owned by Dresser Industries. Who does that go back to? Bush's, right? Who's that owned by? W.A. Harriman Banking, right? Who does that go back to? All the Bonesmen, right? Tight group of guys in power positions, right? They get power, and that's a threat to democracy. All right. So there, right? Food for thought. Do we really have true democracy? It varies, right? The extent of democracy we have. Do we have dictatorship? Well, no. You don't really don't have a dictatorship. Well, I mean, to some extent you do. If the executive oversteps its bounds, right? Uses all this executive privilege and stuff like that, and makes what do you want to call a precedent, for the president like grabbing power, all right? Okay, which happens, all right? And just look at the whole border wall thing, right? How they're using, precedent for the president, defining emergency fund broadly, right? In a non-emergency. All right. Okay. So, you can say, well, do we have like a full-blown dictatorship? No. But do we have an oligarchy? Yeah, we can, right? Oligarchy is ruled by the few. Do we have plutocracy? Pluto was a Roman god of the underworld and a god of wealth. So plutocracy is ruled by the rich, right? Do we have this? Yeah, we can, right? If they get too much power. All right, so here's a very simple look at other groups, dyad, triad, and this is examination of size, intimacy, and stability, right? We kind of covered this already with primary and secondary groups. So a dyad is a group of only two people, right? There's close interaction between these two, very intense, right? So it says here, social interaction in a dyad is typically more intense than in larger groups because they're focused strictly upon each other. Triad is a group with three members and it contains three relationships, so it's more complex dynamics. Instead of one relationship, there's now three, so it triples it. However, there's more complexity that could be now involved: jealousy, power, influence, playing one off the other, right? However, triads are more stable than dyads because one member can act as a mediator, or should a relation between the two become strained, or one member can leave and you still have two, so the group survives. So group size and intimacy, basically as group size goes up, intimacy goes down. However, stability goes up because there's more people, and the gain or loss of one few doesn't really impact the whole group as a whole. All right, so last thing I'll cover is some of the reasons why, more elaborate, why people join groups. All right, I started off with some basic things up here. Right, we said, some basic reasons were self-serving greed, insecurity, sheep herd mentality, especially in like a school situation, little kids, trying to figure out who they are and all insecure. Safety in numbers, promote the sense of self-worth, right? Ego identity, and so other reasons why people form groups, well, for friendship, companionship, common interests, right? To avoid being lonely, socialize, mutual support, insecurity, sense of belonging, enhanced self-identity, loneliness. Some people, oftentimes we're born into groups. We're all born into one group or another. We're born into a family. We're born into a nationality, born into gender, ethnicity, race, religion. And all this results, all this involves socialization. How each of these different categories, these are category groups, right? But they involve socialization. The identities have to be taught. And oftentimes what is involved in socialization is in-group versus out-group identities, right? Where you enhance the perception of the in-group and you degrade the perception of the out-group, right? So another reason why people form groups are for survival, right? Increased strength in numbers, for mutual defense, or mutual increased offensive power to go out and take something from other people, right? To kill them off, to take their resources, to take their land, or whatever. That's been done all the time, right? Gangs, tribes, political parties. Gangs do a lot of nasty stuff, mafia, political parties, nations. Why do people form political parties, right? Because they pool the resources. They have common interest, right? It's going to happen. Nations. So this is getting from smaller to larger. Alliances between nations. NATO. Now, NATO is kind of a unique one. We'll talk about that in a day or two, how NATO is a defensive organization. It's made for mutual defense. But can NATO be used offensively? Right? We'll examine that. Often people are born into groups and then are socialized into them, like we set up here, right? Often that deals with in-group versus out-group bias, distortions, increased access to information and or opportunities and advantages. People do this all the time. They'll join fraternities, bonesmen, or bonesmen are a big one here, or like investment groups. My parents were in an investment group, or they're talking investment, sharing information, right? I don't know if it worked out that well. Everyone's sharing bad information. Well, that didn't work out. Increased power from pooling resources, human and material. My parents never got rich, so I don't think they really shows a lot of good investments. Increased power from pooling resources, human and material. Increased power through coordination and organization for more effective utilization of human and material resources. So if you more effectively use your human and material resources, right, through coordination and organization, right, that gives you more power, right? And it's what made possible the great empires of, the classic great empires. What were they? Roman Empire, Greek Empire, Persian, Babylonian. Babylon was like one of the first ones, right? Things like that, right? What made that possible, right? Well, this recalls you had to recall evolution of societies. The first societies were small hunter-gatherer groups, and then you had advancements in food production with agriculture and with pastoral, right? So the next big increase, you had larger societies and more specialization because you had increased methods of food production. But a big shift was these classical empires. It was no longer just food production, but coordination and organization of resources allow for large empires, right? And oftentimes those resources were controlled through taxation, right? Something that's portable and non-perishable like money, right? Other resources, it could be, anything else that has high concentrated value per weight and volume, right? Then you had industrial societies, right? The key difference here was you had improved coordination and organization here, allow for big empires to exist, right? And all that's required, all the communication between distant parts of the empire, roads, fleets of ships and so forth required. Then you have industrial. Industrial was machine production, all right? Then this is nation states were basically, nations were a novelty prior to the Napoleonic Wars, right? You had, let's say England was a pretty defined nation, and so forth, right? Maybe there were some, nations, but they're kind of loosely held, right? But after the Napoleonic Wars, nations spread all throughout Europe. Nationalism, right, with the state. A combination of nationalism, which is a sense of common identity within a certain territorial boundary, right, that's associated with the state. The state is a political structure for control, right? Then you have post-industrial societies, and you could say we have globalization later, in addition. All right, increased power. So another reason why people form group is increased power through increased access to government positions, right? If you get key positions, in some way, you can be through contractors, lobbyists, or you can get, bureaucrats. Bureaucrats getting key positions of power. Neocon NGOs, neocon think tanks, media organizations. A lot of these bureaucrats. Here's the thing with these neocon think tanks, right? They litter Washington D.C., right? And they're often like holding pens. When a Republican administration is out of office, right, these guys go to these neocon think tanks, and they maintain themselves that way. They're financed oftentimes through corporations, and then they get their funding and their livelihood, whatever. And as soon as another Republican administration comes back in, a lot of these neocon foreign policy guys come back into power, and they're running the show. All right. Political party organizations, agents, presidential cabinet pool, national security agencies. A lot of these bureaucrats populate these things. State Department, Department of Defense, right? We'll talk about these neocons and what potential threats to democracy they pose. Okay. Increased power to increase control over policy planning, collective action, right? An example is executive, right? The president's administration is the chief controller of foreign policy, right? And more, the executive is overstepping its bounds, right? Encroaching upon the legislative body. Small government guys in power, a small group of guys in power can get us into wars, right? So the chief controller of foreign policy is the executive. I mean, what does the legislative have? The Senate has ratification of treaties, right? But who can maneuver a country into war? The executive can. And I've taught you that many times over, right? How it's done, right? But I know that no facts remain. All right. Who remembers these things? Anyways, I've taught you how a small group can get us into wars and how they do it. All right. Increase power through increased control of collective resources, control over budgets, appropriation bills, control over contracts. Right? Who gets contracts? All right, that's it. So what I'll leave you with is the next thing I'm going to cover is 6 groups that can undermine democracy, who are threats to democracy. One is the power elite. I'll talk more of this in detail in lesson number 7 when we talk about government. We'll talk about one of the theories of government by C. Wright Mills as far as American government. Right? He in fact wrote a book called The Power Elite, and I purchased that book. Neocon bureaucrats are a threat. Neocon non-government organizations, right? Private military security contractors, private intelligence corporations, multinational corporations. How they can all be a threat to democracy. How they can all have a significant, overwhelming, inordinate, excessive influence over government, right? Which undermines what? Ruled by the people, democracy, ruled by the people, ruled by the people. All right, is that what's going on? All right, so let's do a quick review. We said that this lesson is about groups and organizations, and we first looked at, well, why people form groups. And to really understand this, you have to go back and examine the self. That's why we do anything, right? It's the self, and it's often not too pretty. It's not too pleasing, right? We tend to think we're more noble than that, but we're not, right? A lot of people are it's just our nature is to be self-serving, right? Not sacrificing and for the greater good or for some principles. People do things that better themselves. And oftentimes they'll rationalize this or that. They'll twist the way they see things to support what they want to do, right? Pretty easily. Then we talked about in-group versus out-group mentality. The differences between these, right? And then we talked about how this leads to tribalism, and that leads, it always involves bias and distortions. And this shows the incredible extent, the crazy extent to which we bias things, right? And how easily we do it, and how baseless that bias is. This is totally baseless bias right here, all this Klein-Kandinsky thing, right? I mean, it's almost a joke that they pick these, abstract art things, right? All right. And then we focused on social reality as the first big group. It's massive these days, right? Has huge impact, and again, it's totally baseless, right? I've explained this so many times, yet people are always going to run back to social reality. Right? So this is all what? This is all bias. This is the self. This is how we distort our selection of facts, how we don't retain the facts. And the one thing we retain is the one thing that supports what we want to believe, right? And how easy it is to just reject things, right? And how people see things based upon their own self-interest, right? They do things all the time and they don't give it a second thought. But if someone else does it, especially if they do it to them, then they go crazy over it. All right, I don't want to get into all the details of social reality. Right? How what forms it, how easy it is to manipulate, how it's baseless, right? And how people do not remember any of the facts. All facts are gone. I swear people will get offended. What are you saying? You saying I'm ignorant? You don't know anything? Well, yeah. Tell me a fact. Just try to tell me one fact. Out of the, thousands and thousands, maybe, so many things I've taught. People can't tell me one thing. All right. So that's it for the introduction to groups. I'll just cover it. We talked about classic sociological analysis of groups, primary versus secondary, reference groups, social aggregates, social categories, all right, organizations, bureaucracies. Bureaucracies are kind of important because, again, bureaucrats can be a threat to democracy. We'll go through some examples today, or actually in the next lessons. All right, that's it for this lesson. Hopefully I made it better.